Welcome, Earthlings, non-Earthlings, ridiculous ones, and soon-to-be ridiculous ones. You are right on time for your ridiculous hour. The time is now, the only time it ever is on the ridiculous hour. We're going to get started here. Derrick Broze is in the building. We'll be introducing him in a moment. But we have a brand new co-host for the ridiculous hour, so we're going to bring her up first. Oh, somebody's throwing some likes at us. Nice. Ashley Olapono, come on up and talk to us about why you wanted to be a co-host of the ridiculous hour.
Hey guys.
What's up? What's up?
What is up? So I decided to be a part of this because what was that?
No.
Okay. So the reason I decided to join this show is because Joe is an awesome person, and I feel like we vibe together, so we're here. That's the reason everything kind of happened. Our whole friendship, we know each other because the vibes. So I just went with it. He was like, you should join. I was like, sure.
Good vibes, good vibes. And so we won't waste time here. We're going to get Derrick Broze on up here. He's been on the show once before, but this time it's a little more exciting because he's running for mayor of Houston, you guys. So can't get much more exciting than that. By the way, for those watching at home, if you're watching this one, you're on my page, you might have a better video by going to Derrick Broze for mayor of Houston. It's a little better angle, a little less blowout. I think you can see everyone except me because there's white behind me and I'm wearing white, but maybe it's better than I can see. But at any rate, Derrick, come on out. Let's talk a little bit about how we're going to get you to be mayor of Houston. Yeah, let's do it. We'll grab the mic and trade it around a little bit. Yeah, that helps a little bit, right? We have an AC running, but we can't turn it off because it gets really bad really quick. So we're gonna get started here. One of the things I want to bring up about Derrick is that this isn't about just Houston. So I hope a lot of people are watching that aren't from Houston because this is a bigger platform than just Houston. The 9 topics that Derrick's going to talk about, most of them would apply for most cities. And we're trying to start a viral campaign to get these messages out there because at the end of the day, these local politicians have been getting away with not weighing in on these topics, and it's not right. And I know from knowing Derrick that he doesn't care if you agree with his stance on these issues. What he wants is more awareness of these issues and force the politicians to actually take a stand. He's not saying you need to agree with his stance on these 9 issues. So I'm going to turn it over to you, brother.
All right. Well, I appreciate that, brother, and I appreciate, both of you. Thank you for being willing to be here. And so I'm running for mayor of Houston, and I think that there's going to be people who are tuned in the different channels we're running on that are familiar with my work and others who are not familiar. So should I do a little explaining of what I'm doing before we get to the mayor thing?
Yeah.
All right, cool. And yeah, thanks to Midtown Bar and Grill for hosting us and having us here, and everybody who's taking the time to watch online, whether live or later, or just tune in. So my name's Derrick Broze. I've been in Houston my entire life. I'm 34 years old. For the last 10 years, I've been involved in various forms of activism, and I'm an independent freelance journalist in Houston and self-taught. I didn't go to school for it. I just sort of learned that I could put cameras in politicians' faces and they would run away, and they didn't want to answer real questions. And that sort of turned into a sport for me, and then that developed into taking it a little more seriously and okay, let me start writing about these things and doing investigations. And so I've been doing that for about the last 10 years. I started an activist community called the Houston Freethinkers in 2010, a few other people. And from 2010 till about 2018, we were involved with community garden builds, feeding the homeless, benefit shows, protests of all kinds, sit-ins. We've done every form of activism, I guess you could say, like building gardens, doing outreach, hitting the streets, passing out flyers, passing out DVDs about important topics and things that we were concerned about, and just all kinds of different things in our path to really connect with Houstonians, but also to try to talk about really important issues. And I was kind of just driven by, I guess, I had my sort of waking up experience like a lot of people have, and just questioning the world around me. And that started in about 2009, 2010, but it really started because in 2005, I got addicted to crystal meth, and then I went to prison. I got locked up when I was a week before I turned 21, so I turned 21, locked up. I was addicted to crystal meth for about 10 months, and prior to that, I'd been using a lot of different drugs. I was sucked into depression. I tried to kill myself. I had this whole really crazy path that ended with me going to get locked up. And it was in there that I got locked up. Once I realized I was going to be there for a while, that I started to get into meditation and do some self-introspection and some self-reflection, asking myself why I got there. And that led to everything else I was talking about. When I got out, all of a sudden I was starting to question things and ask, well, why did I get locked up for this? Not only looking at my own internal world and looking at my own traumas and that sort of thing, and understanding that what led me to use drugs was just being depressed and having these other issues. And so that kind of plays into some of the things we're going to talk about today, like why I feel the drug war is a failure, and having been arrested for drugs and gone to prison and experienced that, and knowing that it's a complete failure of a system that despite the things I'm doing today, like most people don't go into that system and turn their lives around. In fact, usually they get worse. So I have direct experience with that, and that really shifted my perspective. And then I got out and started doing activism and journalism. And as I said, I've done every different type of activism I could think of. I've also been a public speaker for about the last 6 years. The last 2 years, I've done 2 national speaking tours. We did 53 cities last summer. We did 48 cities the year before. And every city we visited, we were volunteering in some way, building a community garden, helping clean up a park or clean up the beach or go feed the homeless. Just different things that we partnered with other activists in the cities to do. My partner Miriam was hosting meditations, and then I was giving talks about community building and just different, some of the ideas that we're exploring through this campaign. And I get invited to speak at different kinds of conferences and festivals around the U.S. and other places for some of the ideas that I've talked about. I've written 4 books exploring some of these ideas. So I've been doing this for a minute, is my point. That kind of, I'm hammering home here, is that I've been doing this kind of work for a while, fully committed. This isn't a hobby that I do. It's become kind of all-consuming, after a while I started to think about some of the things we're going to talk about tonight, and realizing that some of the issues, many of the issues that we're dealing with today are so pressing, and so I think it's kind of like do something now or there's no opportunity, that I felt compelled, like, okay, well, I've been doing this already. I've been putting cameras and microphones in front of mayors and having them run away from me, both this mayor and the previous mayor, the chief of HBT police, doing all that kind of stuff and getting no answers, going to city council and talking about issues and trying to get them to listen and getting no answer and being ignored. And I realized, well, why not just enter the race this year and try to turn these issues into something that maybe people will actually care about. Like you were saying, I'm not really trying to convince everybody to think exactly the way I do, but my 2 main goals when I started this were to expose corruption in the city of Houston, to use my abilities and my knowledge as an investigative journalist to take on these issues, but then also to help amplify the voices of Houstonians, because like I said, in my experience, from what I've seen and what I've been through, I know that if you do go to city council to try to get your voice heard, they can just ignore you. We can get deeper into why that is. But I realize that's, for me, the crux of this. And then there's these 9 issues that kind of come from it, and all of them to me are examples of where the people of Houston didn't have a chance to vote or to say what their thoughts are. City council just did it. The mayor just did it, what have you. So those are my 2 main goals that everything springs from: to expose corruption in this city, both as a journalist and now as a candidate for mayor, and to help amplify the voice of Houstonians. And I say that, one last thing, I say that very specifically because I don't really like it when people, especially politicians, come in and say, like, I'm going to be the voice for the people. The people have their own voice as far as I'm concerned. You guys are all powerful, beautiful people capable of speaking your own truths. So I'm not going to come in and claim, like, putting me in mayor is going to fix the world or save everything. I just want to be that megaphone, to help and listen to what my brothers and sisters care about, and then use the platform as a way, like, all right, let me get that in there. We can, we're going to be in the debate, so we have an opportunity now to get these issues out there.
And I think, taking this message viral is going to be a huge part of giving you an actual chance. Like, if we can get some viral attention and make this more of a global thing, where people are putting their politicians to task and not allowing them to go through a whole campaign and not even mention where they stand on vaccines, like where they stand on cannabis reform. Like, it's okay if you want cannabis to be illegal, but shouldn't people know that? Shouldn't your voters know where you stand on that and be able to vote accordingly? That's the big thing. And so, Ashley, I'm gonna let you give us the lowdown of what we're going to talk about today. Just run through those and tell us what we're going to be getting into.
I'm more of a kind of like call and response. So like when you say things, I kind of respond on that.
Oh, that was great.
Okay.
Well, let us know what you think about these.
Okay, are we gonna go like one each? I think that'll be kind of.
Yeah, let's list them first, and then we'll decide where we're gonna dig in.
Okay, so we have decriminalize cannabis and welcome cannabis business and dangerous no-knock raids. What is that?
A no-knock raid is when the police come to somebody's house that's suspected of a crime, and they don't knock. They just come in with SWAT teams unannounced.
Oh, that's so
Kill people.
Oh my gosh.
Often.
That is so, like, we really need to look at that. Okay, so overturn the city's anti-food sharing ordinance, and then turn city-owned vaccine lots into community gardens. Give Houstonians a say over a controversial 5G rollout. Protect and define freedom of speech and civil liberties. Amend the city's charter to reduce the power of the mayor. End the Houston Police Department use of invasive surveillance tools. Defend medical freedom by standing against mandatory vaccination orders.
Where do we start, Ashley?
Man, let's start with that one I was really interested in. Can we start with that first?
What's that?
The no-knock raids. How are you intend on, like, you know, implementing that and making that, like, how do you expect to do that? Because it does take more than just one person to make that happen. You know, you got to need more people in the circle to do that. So how do you exactly intend on making that happen? Awesome.
Yeah, this one I think is a really important topic. I'm going to go ahead and define it again for those who might not be familiar with what a no-knock raid is, because it's actually, if you look it up today in Houston, you'll see it's been making national news because the police killed a couple and their dog 2 or 3 months ago doing a no-knock raid. You know, so a no-knock raid is, in this particular case, they're called the family. The couple was the Tuttles and their dog that were killed by HPD in January. They were suspected of being big heroin dealers and having weapons. This is what an informant supposedly told HPD. This HPD officer then goes to a judge and says, hey, we have reason to believe these people have weapons, they're dangerous, so it's dangerous to us to announce ourselves, so we need to do a no-knock raid of their house, you know. So cops will use it as a way to, I think it's fair to say, to get around actually having to come get a normal warrant, which means they have to have harder evidence. This could just be kind of like some informant off the street says, so-and-so has this, and that's basically what happened in this case. So they go to the judge gives them a note, gives them a warrant, and apparently the process that the judge does is pretty much just a rubber stamp. There's no real, you know, the bar to prove that you need it is very low, right? So they go get a no-knock warrant, and the cops raid the house of the Tuttles. The Tuttles end up dead, 5 police officers end up shot, their dog ends up dead, and it's just this huge mess. And at first, HPD immediately defends it, and you had the president of the police union say that they were going to go after people on social media who were spreading bad things about police. It was just really like, whoa, where'd that come from? And then, as time has passed over the last 4 or 5 months, we found out that the officer who claimed that this informant said that lied, and they're not even sure the informant even existed. And we found out now the family went and hired a private forensic investigator, and they went to the house because the police left all this kind of evidence there, and they showed that all of the shots came from outside of the house, that the Tuttles didn't shoot back, because HPD claimed whenever they came in the house that Dennis Tuttle shot, you know, at the officers, and then the dog lunged at them, so they had to kill the dog. Well, the forensic evidence that the family hired private investigator shows that the dog was 15 feet away from the door when he was shot, not by the door where he supposedly lunged at the people, and that all the shots, again, came from outside, from where the cops were. So it seems like they lied completely. And, you know, let's stop there for a moment. This is one of the big problems with the no-knock warrant, right? I think any person, any thinking person, especially in the state of Texas, and I would say even more especially in Houston, who has somebody come to their house unannounced, say super early in the morning or super late at night, and they just start beating your door down. If you have a weapon, if that's the way you defend your home, let's say with a gun or a knife or a bat or whatever, you're probably going to pull it out and try to defend your home. And I think that would be reasonable. I'm not saying that it's good that anybody gets harmed on the police or the other side, but I think it's not unreasonable to think that if somebody beats your door down unannounced, you might actually try to defend your home. So that's one of the reasons it's dangerous. It's not only dangerous for the people in the house, but it's dangerous for the officers themselves. And in this case, 5 of them were shot. And that whole case has just fallen apart. As of today, the assistant district attorney in Harris County told HPD they had to hand over all the information they had about the warrants, or they were going to subpoena them in a grand jury. So they turned over some of the documents. So we're still getting the truth about this. This is just one example of this. There's also other cities that have already ruled no-knock raids to be unconstitutional and saying that they violate the 4th Amendment because they're just barging into your home. There's no announcement. And it goes against everything I think that most of us would identify with as a free country.
Yeah, and I think what's important to remember here is if you know, like, most informants are drug users, drug dealers, like, they're not the most upstanding citizens, and I'm not judging them for that, but what I'm saying is if someone has a grievance, like, we're now allowing, like, I got a beef with you, and I'm like, you know, it's kind of like they do in the video game world. People are live stream videos, someone will call the police, they'll find out the address of this person video game live streaming, and they'll call in and bring a raid, because of some information. And none of it's been collaborated, obviously, none of it's actual information. So the issue here is that anyone with a beef against anyone can just say, yeah, I'm pretty sure they're drug dealers, and then bam, you got a no-knock warrant, and it has nothing to do with whether that's actually true or, like you said, it's really easy to get these warrants. So
let me try to actually answer the question. I know I didn't answer it yet.
Yeah.
Well, so just wanted to give everybody kind of the background on an example of this. And so these kind of things happen all over. Like I said, some courts have already ruled that they're unconstitutional. I think that that's a practice that should be stopped immediately. After that shooting happened, the current chief of police, Acevedo, he said, we're not going to get rid of them completely. We don't want to do that. But now we're going to make sure that a trained SWAT team comes along and that they have to get an extra one. They've added more bureaucracy to it. I don't think that's going to fix the situation. The reality is that this problem, no-knock warrants, is actually part of a bigger problem of police violence in general. And I think that's something that people need to recognize, is that I'm not anti-cop by any means. I have an aunt who served in Houston Police Department in the 90s, and I know that there are plenty of people who go into that job looking to actually help their community. But the reality is that no-knock warrants and some of the other topics, like for example surveillance, are just examples of the police having too much power and the communities having very little ability to respond to that. Now, as far as what I would do, so as mayor, you are able to select the chief of police. So I would refuse to work with any chief of police that is interested in these kind of tactics, that wants to use, racial profiling or the stop and frisk like they have in New York, or no-knock warrants or HPD surveillance.
Here's my thing. So no one's gonna come out and straight say, "Hey, I'm racist." No one's gonna come out and sound like they're disagreeing with what whoever's on top has going on. But they literally, that's why I feel like even when they get reported, like these crimes, even though they get reported, it's like, what can you do about it, Because I feel like they lied to you and you believe them, and now you're here. Now what? It's gonna happen again. I don't feel like a complete force is just absolutely not racist or whatever the case may be. I feel like it'll still happen underneath our nose and we won't know it, but we will see it out there on the streets when we think that things are changing.
So, yeah, I appreciate that point. I definitely agree with you that there is definitely, and there's a few studies on this, that there are police departments that seem to be infiltrated with, some police departments, I'm not going to say all, but with white supremacist ideology, and like for a long time. If you look at the history of what police were themselves in the very beginning, which was to catch slaves originally, what the police force has always been used for. Again, I'm not trying to be anti-cop. I'm just saying that I do think there's a lot of areas where our voices aren't being heard, right? So I said my goal is to amplify the voice. If I was elected as mayor, again, I would not work with the police. The first thing I would want to do with whoever the chief of police would be, and I have a couple of people in mind, that we would take an audit of the entire police department and identify all the police officers who've been involved in violence on the streets. Whether if they've killed somebody, or if they have a history of violence with other people. There are officers right now in New York City and other departments who are making $100,000 plus a year, who have literally had incidents where they've raped women, and they're back on the streets. That's just insane to me. So to me, we would do a full audit of the police department, background checks, and look into, identify all the officers who have had incidents. And I'm not saying fire them immediately. In some extreme cases, absolutely, they should be serving on police department. I just think there's certain lines that if they're crossed,
I think that any line along that line should never be crossed. So if you didn't have that intent, or that means that if you can do that, what else can you do? Show me who you really can be. Because I feel like that just little inch could be a whole mile. So at the end of the day, regardless, if you see a little inch or anything like that, that grows. It's like infestation, and it kind of grows, and people start, remember that? Remember what we used to supposed to be for? Really police are meant to be animals, and they just attack people all day. And I just feel like it's just grounded in like their community. Like they come together and they talk about this stuff, and they just kind of like become it, embody it,
Well, some people call it, the thin blue line. I think it is unfortunately something that exists, that there is, and it happens in a lot of different areas, but definitely in the cops, and the situation with the cops. I ultimately think, and this is kind of a deeper philosophical point behind what I'm doing, but I think that it comes down to the power of authority. When you get people like this in positions of authority, and they form their own culture where it's a brotherhood, where I'm gonna look out for you, you look out for me. And it does exist. And again, that's why we can find dozens and dozens, if not hundreds, of stories about cops who have been good cops and stopped some other officer from doing something violent or exposed stuff, and what happens to them? They get fired or they get removed, right? So it's a culture, I think, and that, again, I think that the Houston Police Department is not exempt from that. There are a lot of problems that we can talk about police violence, we can talk about the no-knock warrants. I do think it's down to the core of it, and it's because the mayors that have been coming in and the police chiefs that have been getting elected, like the current police chief, Art Acevedo, he came from Austin, where he had a whole record of violence towards activists out there. I know people who work with the Peaceful Streets Project in Austin, and they were, cop watchers, and they would go out there and film, and they had just, a whole string of events with this guy, and that's who they chose to put into power here in Houston. So I think it starts with, I don't want to say it starts with the leadership because it starts on the ground, but if you have leadership that is corrupt, then everything they're going to touch and everything they're going to put in there is just going to be more of their corrupt cronies, and that's what we have.
Yeah, and I think as a society, as a caring, loving society, it's important for us to take our own responsibility over the energy we're putting into it too. Like if we go to school together and I tell everyone to treat you like an asshole, before you know it, you're probably going to become an asshole because everyone's treating you like an asshole. You know what I mean? Like, it's an energy of, if everyone's hating the cops, well, it's going to be really hard for the good cops to not turn bad. You know what I mean? And there's a lot of good cops out there, I think. I've run across a lot of good cops. And so I think it's important for our energy to stay pure and, like, give them the benefit of the doubt. Don't hate someone just because they're wearing blue. Like, there's once they've done something or once they've, gone past the law, and trust me, this is something I struggle with big time. That's why I'm bringing it up.
I think that's not true anymore. At this point, I feel like everything is becoming more obvious and plain to the eye because of social media, and it's a beautiful thing. I love it because, it has its pros and its cons, but it's more obvious and it's more of an awareness, and it's bringing attention to it, like what we need. And I feel like the more we egg at it, we're like collectively bringing more people along to this awareness, and people are starting to see how things really go along, how things really play about, and just catching it all on film is becoming so, like, it makes you more cautious of how you live and how you move. Because I had a friend, and I know him personally, he told me that he got pulled over, right? And he was going at 40 in the 35, and he had 3 cops with him. I guess they saw he has really big hair. They saw his hair texture or whatever. They came to the car with guns drawn. And he's like, I'm not going to move my hand. And they're like, go in your glove compartment. He said, I told you what I got in there. He has a gun in there, but I'm not going in there. He said, they said, say it again. And then he put his hand behind his head. He started crying. Before he knew it, the cops left. He said he was still staying there. I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to do it, crying. So I guess they saw that as opportunity to do something to him. But the fact that he didn't touch the glove compartment, there's cameras everywhere. There's people everywhere, The fact that he didn't move, he was crying. They saw that and it was like, well, what are we gonna do? We can't give him a ticket for going 30, 40 on the 40, 35, Like, it's not a big deal. So they had to just leave. And I feel like it's crazy because you would have never thought of that long time ago. You think things are getting better. No, they've been happening. They're just becoming more obvious now. So, to assume that cops are bad, it doesn't sound like a bad idea. I don't think you should go first off, hey, cop, what are you doing? He's gonna shoot you. That's it. That was too much movement for them. So it's like, you gotta be on your toes, crossing your teeth, dotting your eyes, especially as a minority myself, or just speaking for the minorities in general. Like, we just have to be on our high horse about it.
I want to respond to that, and I'm happy to move forward when you guys are ready. One thing I want to say on that is, I agree with you completely as far as experiences being different for people if you're a minority in a big city, or if people of color in general. But and then there's also the case that, like, for example, the people I just mentioned, they were both white people that were killed in a no-knock raid. So it unfortunately affects all of us. And what I think is important to remember, because you bring up some good examples. I went to Ferguson to cover that as a journalist and to be out there to support in 2014. I've been to some other situations where the police are definitely the aggressor. But ultimately, I do believe in looking at each person as an individual, and I try not to collectivize people and say, well, all white males are the same, all black women are the same, all cops are the same, or really anything, and always meet somebody as an individual, as they are, because I know that there's, shitty people are shitty everywhere. It doesn't matter what, color you are, what sexual orientation you are. So I do try to meet people as an individual. And at the same time, I can't help it if when a cop drives by, my heart starts beating fast, even if I'm doing nothing wrong at all, just because of some of the things that I've been through. And so I don't blame people.
They know you, bro. They know you.
Well, yeah, they definitely tried to get me locked up here for my activism.
Yeah, and there was an insider, a cop insider that clued Derrick in that they were talking about him and his group in their police meetings. So the struggle is real. wanted to watch out for this guy, basically. I mean, he was on their radar, and probably still is. But let's move on to decriminalize cannabis, welcome cannabis businesses.
Yeah.
Oh, by the way, that yell was from Coop Martian. He's going to be playing a song in a little bit. We're going to take a little mini break and let him roll a song out for us, just to give us a little break here in a moment. But I'm going to let you... So let me ask a specific question about this, though. When you say decriminalize cannabis, this is... I don't even know. I'm ignorant to this, but is this thing that has to happen on the state level, or could this happen on the Houston level?
Okay, cool. So yeah, I definitely... I'm glad Coop's playing. I didn't know that, so that's cool. Looking forward to that. Well, if you don't mind, Joe, before I answer that, I just want to let the audience know and everybody listening, in case I haven't said it. So, as part of, I'm running for mayor. We filed back in May. Next month is when there's a second filing period, which is where you get official and then you're actually a candidate, right? And the city I've learned this just since I've joined, the city puts up walls to try to keep normal people from running. I think it's the way I kind of see it. So for example, to run for mayor, you got to pay a $1,200 filing fee to be in the race, alone, or you got to gather like 100,000 signatures, but they don't tell you till the last minute. Just there's all these silly little things. So we are fundraising this whole week to try to make sure that I can stay in the race through November. We've already been accepted into 4 debates in the fall, but in order to do that, I need to make sure I can pay that filing fee I think it starts July 15th. So this week, all this week, we're doing different events. This is day 1 of 7 events in 7 days. So we're doing this interview tonight. Tomorrow I'll be going to City Council and inviting everybody to come to City Council with me. Wednesday we'll be going to volunteer and feed the homeless with food, not bombs. Thursday we're gonna go do a clean up the bayou downtown. Friday we're gonna be back here not here, we're gonna be at the G-Spot Art Gallery in the Heights. I'm gonna be doing a teach-in on 5G, which we'll talk about in a little bit. Saturday we're gonna be back here for a concert fundraiser. And then Sunday, we're gonna hit the streets and pass out flyers. So we're doing 7 events in 7 days just to show people that I'm out here, I'm doing things. I'm gonna be focused on the issues that I'm talking about. And if anybody is interested in supporting us, we do have a crowdfunding campaign going on now, and that can be found on the Derrick Broze for Mayor of Houston page. And $5 goes a long way these days. So we're just trying to raise enough money to get that filing fee, to get more flyers and propaganda made, some yard signs, and just stay in this thing to keep talking about these real issues. So I just wanted to mention that.
Oh, go ahead. So take us into how your ideal play out of the decriminalization of cannabis would happen in this city and this state.
All right. And you asked about, can this happen on a local level? It can happen on a local level. The interesting thing about cannabis is we've already seen, first with California as a state, but then like Denver and other places, that despite drugs being like cannabis and psilocybin now, and now other places are legalizing ayahuasca and things of that sort, despite these things being illegal, according to the federal government, the big federal government run by Donald Trump, despite that, there are certain states and cities that are basically saying, like, we're gonna just do it anyways. And so far, the federal government has decided not to spend the resources to come chase people down. Like, you hear things about there's still raids that happen periodically in California, but not, they're not like beating people, like every business down, because they've sort of settled on this, like, it's making us a lot of money and we don't have the resources to chase down every pothead anymore. And so it started to change. And when Denver legalized cannabis, and it's blown up as a billion-dollar business now, and people have seen, and now other cities and other states are starting to follow with psilocybin, with ecstasy is going to be legalized soon for medical reasons. So we're seeing this culture change, and ideally that's what I want to do in Houston, is basically just say, look, there's no reason that, again, the police should be pursuing people who are doing nonviolent crimes. I mean, I don't even know if you could call using drugs a crime. I personally believe it is your body, your choice. I believe in bodily autonomy. I believe you own yourself, and I think it's your decision how you choose to medicate yourself, whether that means use cannabis medicinally or what you choose to drink, whether that's a beer or smoke a joint for yourself or something else. And even as a former drug addict, as somebody who was addicted to crystal meth and Xanax and other things, I do ultimately believe in the long term, I'm not saying this is something I'm calling for right now, but I do think in the long term all drugs should be decriminalized, and that we have plenty of evidence from other countries and other cities that show that the opposite happens that most people expect. You don't end up with an explosion of drugs everywhere and drug addicts all over and all the kids addicted. Once you decriminalize it and you make it where people aren't afraid to come get help, because like I said, I was addicted before, but my drug addiction was really just a symptom of my depression and all these other things I was dealing with. And I didn't have the tools or really know how to do it. But when you open up the door and say that somebody can get help rather than going to get thrown in a cage, they will come pursue help, So I think that there's ways we can go about this, that starting with cannabis, we can decriminalize it because there's no reason people should be in 2019 being locked up for cannabis. We're 100 years since the first cannabis law was passed in 1914, the Harrison Act, and people are still dealing with that, and Harris County has already slightly decriminalized it, so we have an example of what happened. So 2 years ago, the District Attorney Kim Ogg instituted a program to decriminalize cannabis in the entire county. So this means if you get caught with weed, if you're a first-time nonviolent offender, I think it was up to like an ounce, you basically get 2 ounces. Okay, so you get like a ticket, and then you have to go take a class and this and that. They don't arrest you, and you can take care of it, right? Now they've expanded the program to not just first-time, offenders, but pretty much all people, and even I think felons like myself are open to this. So they've expanded the program, and in 2 years, the city has saved $35 million. So that's $35 million of police resources and taxpayer money not being used to go chase down people who are smoking weed, not locking people up for doing that. And I think that is, not only is it an economic advantage, but you can start to chip away at the drug war, which has affected all kinds of families across Houston and across the world. It has definitely affected minority populations, people of color, indigenous communities, as well as poor white communities in different parts of the country that are afflicted with, say, for example, the opioid crisis that are affected by that. And the big problem is prohibition does not work. It's never worked. You try to keep people from doing something. We saw this with alcohol. You just create a black market for it, and that black market thrives, and it just shows that there's a demand. So rather than the state be in the way and say, look, we're going to lock you up based on some 100-year-old laws and put you in jail for possessing a plant or smoking a plant or using it medicinally or what have you, we're going to end that and make it all citywide, where again I would work towards getting a police chief that would have no interest in pursuing cannabis and starting there, and then can get help rather than going to get thrown in a cage. They will come pursue help. So I think that there's ways we can go about this, that starting with cannabis, we can decriminalize it because there's no reason people should be in 2019 being locked up for cannabis. We're 100 years since the first cannabis law was passed in 1914, the Harrison Act, and people are still dealing with that, and Harris County has already slightly decriminalized it, so we have an example of what happened. So 2 years ago, the District Attorney Kim Ogg instituted a program to decriminalize cannabis in the entire county. So this means if you get caught with weed, if you're a first-time nonviolent offender, I think it was up to like an ounce, you basically get 2 ounces. Okay, so you get like a ticket, and then you have to go take a class and this and that. They don't arrest you, and you can take care of it, right? Now they've expanded the program to not just first-time, offenders, but pretty much all people, and even I think felons like myself are open to this. So they've expanded the program, and in 2 years, the city has saved $35 million. So that's $35 million of police resources and taxpayer money not being used to go chase down people who are smoking weed, not locking people up for doing that. And I think that is, not only is it an economic advantage, but you can start to chip away at the drug war, which has affected all kinds of families across Houston and across the world. It has definitely affected minority populations, people of color, indigenous communities, as well as poor white communities in different parts of the country that are afflicted with, say, for example, the opioid crisis that are affected by that. And the big problem is prohibition does not work. It's never worked. You try to keep people from doing something. We saw this with alcohol. You just create a black market for it, and that black market thrives, and it just shows that there's a demand. So rather than the state be in the way and say, look, we're going to lock you up based on some 100-year-old laws and put you in jail for possessing a plant or smoking a plant or using it medicinally or what have you, we're going to end that and make it all citywide, where again I would work towards getting a police chief that would have no interest in pursuing cannabis and starting there. And then also as part of this plan, we live in a city that has this massive medical center. What do you think would happen if they started devoting some of their resources to cannabis research, to CBD, to looking to all the different cannabinoids that are in this beautiful plant, and to the terpenes and all the medicinal information that we're getting? I mean, it could be a huge change.
I think it's all about the money at the end of the day. As far as that, I feel like, what keeps it running is people dying and getting sick. So why would they invest in something that's going to heal people? We just want to give you something that's going to keep you living, not necessarily take the pain away, but just kind of sustain you. How you ever think about how come people don't look for how to fix someone? They look at things how to treat them. Yeah. It's like you're missing the fine line of being healed completely. Instead, you want to use this to make you feel better. Yeah. Take this, and now I'm dying, and now I have cancer, and I only broke a toe, and now I have cancer. How's that happening? It's all about the money, I feel like, in that aspect. So it's really another perspective to even look at. It's kind of like So, I mean, like, what could you be opening up? That portal is kind of like, I don't know.
Well, so on that one, that's more, I'd say, of a suggestion at this point, because I'm sure the city of Houston funds some of the medical district in some way. And so basically, as a mayor, you could say, all right, we're going to withhold these funds unless they go towards this type of research, And again, you'd have to have somebody willing to do that. So to me, decriminalizing cannabis is kind of just a bigger step. It's actually, and I'll share this here with you guys, Joe, first. It's something I plan on putting out like a full kind of policy plan for next month. But this is part of a bigger plan that I'm calling Hemp Houston, which my vision is not only to decriminalize cannabis, and as you've read, to welcome cannabis businesses. What I mean by that is basically to make it clear, like, look, Houston is going to be what we're calling a sanctuary city for cannabis. We're going to tell business owners, come here. Our police will not come after you if you open up a cannabis shop, a medical, a dispensary, or, a tea house or something like that. Obviously there will be some details to work out, but basically make it clear that Houston is going to become a hub for that. Now, about a week and a half ago, the state of Texas legalized industrial hemp farming in Texas. So Houston should be, as the biggest city in the state, should pursue being the number one hemp farm in the United States, not only in Texas, but in the United States. And the way I see it is, as the part of this plan that I'm calling Hemp Houston, is I want to move Houston away from being known, the petro metro that's completely dependent on the oil companies and some of these companies who've been involved with all sorts of environmental disasters, and I just think businesses that we shouldn't support, and even businesses that are involved in weapons of war, like Halliburton and others. The city of Houston should move away from that, because that's old thinking, that's old paradigm, and in turn, embrace hemp. Hemp can be used as a fuel, hemp can be used for textiles, for cloth, for all kinds of different things. So you bring cannabis in not only as a medical service, not only as a recreational activity, but then for farming of hemp. And I mean, the plan gets even bigger. I want to put hemp all around Houston, all along the bayou, help reduce flooding by putting hemp there to help absorb the water and reduce erosion. And so I think that, to me, is, just saying decriminalize cannabis, and some people are happy because they're going to get to smoke weed, and I'm right there with you. But it's a much bigger vision than just that.
Yeah, and just for those listening that don't get the distinction, cannabis is the family, right? Then you got two first cousins under cannabis, which is hemp and marijuana. Hemp doesn't, the amount of THC in hemp is negligible. That's why you can sell hemp seeds at Whole Foods, right? But in 1972, Richard Nixon made both of them illegal. He basically put them together and made them both illegal. Why? It was because of the nylon industry in a huge way. The nylon industry back then had they were in the pockets of the politicians, and hemp was a better nylon than nylon. And hemp was better at being gas than gas. Hemp was better at being paper than paper, and all these different things. So hemp basically got put out of business because of its value to humanity. Back in the 1800s, if you had a certain amount of land in this country, it was law that you had to grow a certain amount of hemp. So that should tell you how important it was. And the fact that hemp was ever illegal should give you some clues. And I didn't even know it was illegal. It was legal to grow it again in Texas. That's great news. So indeed. So anything else on that one before we move on?
I think that's probably, I just want to reiterate that, to me, look, this is not just about, like, I've been working with Cannabis Reform in Houston, which is the local group. I'll be speaking with them in July. They're just kicking ass on this issue, and they're pushing it because for medical reasons, some people want recreational, and I think that's important, but I really want to just hammer home that, again, it's a part of a bigger plan, not only to reduce the amount of people who are in prison and getting locked up and having their lives ruined over weed and these other drugs, but to save millions and millions of dollars to the city that could be, hey, maybe that could pay some firefighters, who knows? And then also to bring hemp into the city. So I just want people to understand that it's not just about getting high and those things. There's a medicine behind it, there's an economic value behind it, and there's also the human element that we could keep people out of prison for drugs, for cannabis.
Cool, so where do we go next? I think, I don't want to miss out on 5G, so I don't know how much time we're going to have, so let's get into 5G. And actually, I'm going to let you run this conversation. I'm going to go talk to my boy Coop about what we need to get him going for his song. And I'm going to let you, you're the host, take over.
I got you. Let's do this. Okay, so I guess it's only right to kind of like give the basis understanding of what 5G is, because when he first kind of told me 5G, I was like, okay, 5G what? Like there's different things you could call 5G, so when he told me, he kind of explained it. So could you give us like a back understanding of exactly what that is?
Absolutely. So 5G it stands for the 5th generation of cellular technology, and it's currently being rolled out in the United States and in most modern developed countries across the world, China, Australia, the UK and others. And basically what it means is that we're just moving into a new phase. 1G was basic old, big huge phones that we see on old school TV shows with just basic calls, wireless calls. 2G was phones that the old brick phones, you could make a phone call and you could send text. 3G is when we started getting pictures, and 4G is where we're at now with streaming of videos and images and all that kind of stuff that we're used to. 5G is going to be the next stage, and what separates it, and it really makes it a quantum leap, there's no, going from 2G to 3G and 3G to 4G is nothing like what we're undergoing right now. The process is just a huge shift, and what it involves is something that's called the Internet of Things. And the idea of the Internet of Things is basically that in this future we're moving into, not only we're going to have the computers and the smartphones that are interconnected and the tablets and everything, but that we're going to have, and we're already starting to have smart homes, smart fridges and smart toasters and all kinds of different things, Alexas and smart TVs and smart walls and driverless cars and all these different things. Well, each of these devices has sensors in it, which has microphones and oftentimes recording devices and usually cameras. And so that interconnectivity is what they're calling the Internet of Things. And that in order for us to have that, to have driverless cars and robot assistants and all these kind of things, we need to have this new spectrum of the wireless spectrum, which is what they're calling 5G. And there are a number of different issues associated with it. There are privacy concerns, there are health concerns, there's a loss of local power, and I can talk all about those. Go for it? Okay, yeah, so yeah, that's basically what 5G is. It's this new part of the spectrum that hasn't been used for wireless and for cell phones before, but it has been used in some very interesting ways. It's what is known as millimeter waves. And so anybody who goes to fly at the airport, if you have to go through the body scanner operates on millimeter waves as well. And about 8 or 9 years, there was a lot of protests and people pushing back because of the health concerns with those machines. And so that's why they tell pregnant women not to go in there and older people and kids not to go in there, because if you're flying all the time or you're just getting exposed to that, it affects your skin. So that's the same type of waves that they're using for 5G, same spectrum. And the problem with this spectrum with millimeter waves is that they're very easily blocked, say by trees or buildings, and they only travel about 200 to 500 feet. So right now we have maybe a giant cell tower like down the block right here, like maybe another one in another neighborhood over here. But in order for 5G, the Internet of Things, this driverless car future that they want, robot assistants, all that, in order for that to work, they're going to have to put these small cell sites, which are just a box that they attach to a pole, every 200 to 500 feet. That means there'll be one right here at the corner of West Gray and Taft, one right here at the corner of West Gray and Montrose, one right there at the, every 200 to 500 feet. And so this is starting to roll out. Houston is one of the first test cities. The mayor announced it last fall. And I've been researching it for about 9 months now, a little more, maybe about a year or so. And I have really just started to focus on, I've interviewed researchers from Washington State University. I've interviewed experts with the Environmental Health Trust. I've interviewed lawyers with the American Civil Liberties Union about the privacy concerns and the security concerns. So I've just been collecting data and researching. I've been going to city council and trying to get the mayor to talk about it, trying to get the city council to talk about it. We've had people, been working with a group called Houstonians Concerned with 5G on Facebook, and we've been sending emails and phone calls and trying to get their attention, and they're just not listening. And not only is the mayor not listening, the mayor is straight up in the back pocket of these telecom companies, the Verizon and Sprint. The mayor received what is called the 5G Wireless Champion Award last fall, which is awarded by the CTIA, which is the Cellular Telephone Internet Association, which is basically the lobby for the wireless companies. They spend all this money to try to get bills that are favorable to them. So they gave the mayor this award. The mayor announces a new contract with Verizon, and then by October they announced the world's first 5G customer here in Houston. And now they're rolling them out. It's in Acres Home, which is a predominantly black neighborhood. That's the first place they rolled it out. They're rolling it out in Tanglewood. It's starting to pop up, and now we have both Verizon and Sprint involved in this. So as I said, I've been researching this for quite a while. I have interviews with people talking about the health aspects and the privacy, because as I mentioned earlier, with everything having a sensor and all these different devices having microphones and recording devices, it's essentially going to be the very end of what little bits of privacy we have left. And the reality is that intelligence agencies like the CIA have already talked about that moving into the 5G world, the smart grid, which is what they're calling it, smart grid, smart cities, is going to make it easier for them to spy, because they can use, and it's already been shown that people's Alexas, for example, can turn on remotely, record their conversations, and then not only are they sending them to Amazon and they're doing it with whatever they want, but that there have been accidents where it's accidentally, went on your contact list and sent a recording of your whole conversation to your mom or something. There's really random things. So the reality is that there's a lot of smart kids out there, some 10-year-old hacker who could easily hack these systems. They're not shown to be very safe. There's security concerns, there's privacy concerns. And my last point on this that I think is probably the most important for us here in Houston on the local level is that the rollout of 5G is a huge theft of local power and local rights and states' rights and city rights, because both the state of Texas and the federal government, United States government, have passed laws that take away the local power and help take away the ability, for example, the city of Houston to decide how much they want to charge these companies, to study it, to hold it in a public comment period. So the federal government, through the FCC, the Federal Communications Commission, which regulates all the airwaves and the internet, which is made up of former Verizon employees and lawyers, is basically writing rules and laws that are taking away local power. And then a couple of months ago, Donald Trump issued an executive order which said that all localities will have to approve of new cell sites for 5G within 90 days. So he said some of these cities, they just get so greedy and they try to slow down the process and charge all kinds of money. Well, we're not going to have that anymore. They have to approve it within 90 days. So my point here is that we've got everything working against us. We've got a mayor who's already in the back pocket of this industry, and the city council not listening. The only way that we could stop it in Houston, and the way I've seen people stopping in other cities, is you'd have to have people in power, like the mayor, the city council, who are willing to say, you know what, we're going to get sued. We'll file a lawsuit with Verizon. Because since there's already a contract between the city of Houston and Verizon, we would have to say, we're going to end this contract. And Verizon would immediately sue the city of Houston. And that could cost a lot of money in taxpayer dollars. But that's what's happening in Danville, California. That's what's happening in Portland, Oregon. There are some cities that are actually passing rules or saying, you know what, we're going to not do this. We're going to face lawsuits, but we're going to deal with it. And unfortunately, we just don't have people in power right now who are willing to do that. But I'm like, bring it on, dude. If that's what it takes, like, let's go to court with the federal government. Let's go to court with Verizon and see what it takes. Because the reality is that once you put this in place, I think it's going to be very difficult to roll it back.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and I think the important thing is neither Derrick or I or Ashley or anyone can say for certain that 5G is harmful. But the alternative of that is, can anyone say that 5G is safe? Could anyone have said microwaves were safe 30 years ago? Could anyone have said Wi-Fi was safe 15 years ago? Like, we just don't know. And, well, who are they going to test it on? You got to have some lab rats, right? Well, our mayor just turned us in, and now Houston, we got a bunch of lab rats here in this city, and, they're testing out some certain neighborhoods. If nobody dies within a month, they're going to say, we're good to go, it's safe. We told y'all nobody died. Y'all, this is like long-term effects. You don't just like turn on the 5G and everyone starts dying off. Like, this causes this could cause cancer. This could cause seizures. This could cause anxiety, stress, depression. And what are they doing to say, this is where we were as a city before, from an anxiety level, stress, how many people getting cancer per year, and this is where we're going to be after. They're not doing any of that testing. So not only are we lab rats, but they're not even collecting any data. Like, they're not even saying, are some of the lab rats dying or not? They're not. I guarantee you they're not going to start watching local doctors' offices and see if the rates went up. So they're using us as lab rats, and they're not even gathering good information from us.
I just feel like it's all about the money at the end of the day. No matter how we want to look at it and what perspective, and try to figure out what they're thinking, because they know what things are doing. They know how life works. I feel like it's been passed down through experience. They just want to know how to make the quickest buck. So I feel like, if anything, it's definitely more on the basis of how will we make more money in the future? Because we're taking all your money and your donations for cancer, but we yet to cure any of it. But we're here taking all the money. So I feel like at the end of the day, it's just another platform, another opening of making money, more opportunities to do just that. So it just takes about being a good person and like getting out of the money idea. It's kind of, I actually would love to know how you would intend on like slowing down, because I feel like it's just an American, I don't even know if it's an American thing or like a worldly thing, but people are just becoming more and more greedy, and it doesn't even matter what, how it affects other people. Become so selfish because they don't even have to interact with those people. They don't know anything what we go through or whatever the case may be. They just know that their value is more important, and that's just how they see it. So I'm trying to see like how would you
So let me respond to what you say. Well, both you guys are saying about 5G. So one thing I do want to say is we actually do know that it's harmful, and we know that Wi-Fi is harmful as well. So like I said, I've interviewed Dr. Martin Paul of Washington State University, and I advise anybody just look up my name and look up Dr. Martin Paul, and you can find that interview. But we have actually studies from Russia back in the 70s when they proved that this spectrum that 5G is operating on did have harmful effects. Dr. Martin Paul says he thinks it's down to the mitochondrial level, that it's basically causing calcification of the cells and then breaking down. There's other studies looking at DNA effects. We know with Wi-Fi, for example, it can affect sleeping patterns and anxiety. But you are right, Joe, that they're not measuring anything. So let's say even if, and it's also not an instant thing, like they split this 5G switch and then you grow an extra arm or something. Like these are things that are going to happen over time, just like the effect at the airport. It's a cumulative effect. So if you're flying all day and doing body scanners, then yeah, you're more likely to get cancer than somebody who does it once every 5 years or something like that, right? But that's the problem, is since these towers are going to be every 200 to 500 feet, we are going to be swimming in what some people are calling an electronic smog or a digital soup, things of that sort. And I just want to make sure I do mention the solution. So what is the solution, of course? Again, this is another answer where the people of Houston did not have a chance to say, do you want 5G? The mayor just went out and got his 5G Wireless Champion Award, and he made his deal with Verizon, and that was that. And every time I've tried to ask him, he's literally run away from me or told me, oh, time's up at city council, and I can't give you an answer. The only thing he said is, I love 5G. He's made that very clear. And just to mention, Tony Busby and Bill King, the other candidates a lot of people are paying attention to, have also said they support 5G. And seem totally ignorant on the dangers. So the solution that I'm proposing is, if elected mayor, we would initiate an immediate moratorium on 5G. And what that means is that we would say halt, because these are already rolling out on the city, so some of them are already there. Well, let's stop. There should be no more installed, right? And then we can start talking about, well, should we start taking the old ones down? Or maybe we should study, I don't know, we need to look at it, because, for example, one of the neighborhoods that I've been working with, Tanglewood, which is over there by the Galleria, they already have a 5G pole right outside of an elementary school. So, it's already happening. And so, of course, these are concerns for not just children, but for just everybody, right? So, immediate moratorium on any more 5G cell sites being installed. And then what we would do is hold probably, I'd say, 90 days, if not more, a 90-day public comment period, because a big problem with the city council is that the people of Houston don't have a chance to speak. How many of you, knew that this was going on, or when this was being, none of us typically do. Unless you're, downtown every week paying attention, you have no idea where they're spending your money, what tools they're buying, what surveillance equipment, what contracts they're signing, and that's a problem. And so there was never a public comment period for 5G. You never had a chance to go downtown and say, hey, I have concerns about this. There was never an environmental impact assessment to see how it would affect the environment of Houston, because some studies are showing effects on trees. The trees, not just cutting down trees for the towers, but the actual effects of the EMF on the trees themselves. So there needs to be, at the minimum, a 90-day public comment period, immediate moratorium on any more installation of 5G towers, and then hold an environmental impact assessment. And I would like to reach out to some of these doctors that we see online that are speaking out, Dr. Deborah Davis, Dr. Martin Paul, some of these that are going to Congress and speaking out, and bring them here to Houston and have them lead independent studies. And then after all that's done, let Houston vote on it. Because that's a big part of my campaign. I'm not trying to say that I want to be the dictator and decide things for you. I have my views, and I'm trying to express these problems, and I want people to look at them, but I want people to have the freedom to say, you know what, yeah, it is dangerous, yeah, okay, it might be spying on us, yeah, we're losing our power, but we want our faster downloads. And if that's what you want, then
video games are going to be fast.
Then do it, but I'm going to be moving out if you decide you want that. But that's what I'm proposing, is I think that we have to, again, give people a voice. And so I'm not saying ban it, I'm saying let's study it, let's look at how it's going to affect the environment, and let's let Houston decide.
Yeah, and I think it's important to remember that it's possible that this is a little more sinister than we've talked about. I'm not saying it is, but with all that I've seen, I don't think putting fluoride in the water was an accident. It calcifies the pineal gland, it slows down brain function. That was not an accident. Hitler did it to the Jews. There's reasons that they're jacking with us. And I'm not saying it's sinister, but I think it is a possibility that when you have masses of people waking up and starting to figure out their government's fucking them over and all these different things, well, how do you keep those people down? For one, you try to hide them from the information, so they're starting to censor Facebook, censor YouTube, and all these things.
Joe, didn't you know that the New York Times said that if you're afraid of 5G, you're a Russian propagandist now? That came out a couple weeks ago.
Well, every time they're saying that Russian bots did something, it's my friends. So I guess all my friends are Russian bots because, to my knowledge, none of them are Russians. But everything that my friends are up to, and your friends too, like the activists, everything we're doing, they're like blaming it on Russian bots. Like, it's us, y'all. It ain't Russian bots. But yeah, I think there's a good possibility that they're rolling this out to screw with our brain function. I mean, a lot of people don't know that the brain operates on vibration and frequency and things like that, but I think these people do know that at the high levels. I mean, there's some information that's been passed along that I think they do know, and I think it could be very sinister. I think they could be doing this to keep us enslaved. I mean, they already have us pretty much so sick and tired. We're working so much because of mortgages and inflation, and they set up this enslavement trap that we're all in together, and we're starting to realize we're trapped, but there's not much you can do about it. Like, I gave up my real job a few years back and all that, but after a while, I had to go get a real job again because I was going hungry, you know? Like, there's not a lot of ways to get out of this trap, and I think this could be something that they're adding to further cloud our brains. I mean, I could list off from fluoride to aspartame to MSG to all these different poisons that they're putting in our air, our water, our food. Like, you can't escape it. GMOs, Monsanto, glyphosate, like all these things. I don't think it's all just an accident because they were trying to mass produce food, for example. I think it's a little more sinister than that.
Joe, you're starting to sound like one of these conspiracy theorists. I joke, but no, I appreciate you keeping it real, man, because why else should I run for mayor if not to speak truth and keep it real, right?
Yeah.
So while I tend to, especially as a journalist, try to stay away from speculating too much about people's motivations, the reality is that we do know that the 5G spectrum has been used by the Department of Defense as a weapon of war. They've talked about using it as a crowd control weapon, and they can basically aim this weapon. Say you're standing there protesting in front of the White House, they want to get you out of there, they aim this thing at you, and you start feeling a heating on your skin. And so the reality is that this can be used as a weapon. Now, time will tell if that's what it's there for, but this is why I'm raising, 5G is not the only issue I'm focused on, obviously, but it definitely was one of the things that got me started because I realized just how corrupt this particular thing is and how much it connects to other things. And now that I've met people in Tanglewood and talked to people across the city who reached out to me who are trying to fight it on the homeowners association level and the neighborhood level, I realized that, okay, we're not alone. There are people in Houston who do have concerns, but none of the other candidates are going to talk about this. And as I said, the mayor, Turner, he supports it, Tony Busby supports it, Bill King supports it. And those are the three main candidates that the media is trying to get you to focus on. I'm the only one that's actually talking about this in this way, and I think I just want people to recognize it.
Welcome back, y'all. Hope y'all enjoyed the interlude. And I think that's what this whole thing is about. It's like collaborating with people that get it. You got music that gets it. You got activists that get it. You got groups that get it. And if we all just come together to support each other, I'm calling out to anyone that knows Derrick, that believes in his message. This is a good time for you to step up your game a little bit. Like a lot of us have the right intentions. We study the right stuff. We watch a whole lot of YouTube videos, but here's where the rubber meets the road. Here's where you can actually get a message across. And even if Derrick doesn't win mayor, which is a possibility, it's an outside chance that he doesn't win mayor, we could still leave a legacy for the city of Houston by what he creates and what he forces these other mayors to address. And hopefully this can become a thing, like I said, where it goes viral and people are like, you know what? Why haven't we been asking our local candidates to weigh in on these topics? That's kind of ridiculous that we let them get away with not talking about these things.
And I feel as though that what will help this now is just social media. It's very much like helpful and beneficial for us to understand things. It just only takes someone who's intelligent enough or bold enough to make that advance and letting everyone know. And it doesn't take too much at this point. Back in the day, it used to be much harder, but now that we've gotten so advanced with technology, it's important for us to captivate all the things that we need to be looking at, not what they want us to look at. More of a focus on the major big deal, because sometimes we go nose blind to certain things that happen to us because we just know it's not normal. If it's normal, then we only pay attention to it. When it's weird, we just kind of like, I don't understand it, I'm uninterested. So this is important, and I feel like it's a great, even if things don't go as planned, we know that our outlet through social media and just a word of mouth, and it just takes that person, that leader, to make that word out. It just has to get out there.
I definitely would support both of y'all just said, and I appreciate everybody who's been tuned in. Of course, Coop, and you're right. Honestly, I've been doing the math and really thinking. One of the things that was driving me when I started to consider this, because this I started thinking about this back in March or so, and it took about 2 months of conversations with good friends and reaching out to people that I respect and asking like, what do you think about this, idea I'm working on, before I decided to really do it. And part of my motivation was realizing, okay, there's about 4 to 5 million in the greater Houston area, but in say the Houston city limits, there's about 3.5 million, right? And there's a 1.2 maybe registered voters, about 1 million registered voters. And in the last election, only about 300,000 people, or maybe only 200,000 voted. So it's a tiny percentage of the people that are even paying attention to the city of Houston. And I personally think that's kind of by design, because when you look at the mayoral races, literally, go look at Sylvester Turner and Tony Busby, Bill King's website. It looks like they're cut from the same exact template. It says things like, it's time for more hope and more change. I mean, just these really cliche phrases. It's all red, white, blue, and just, it looks very cookie cutter and like you would expect a politician. The main issues they're talking about are just potholes, and not say that that isn't an issue, but I mean, they just focus on these issues to me that are very small and minor that don't affect every Houstonian, like, for example, 5G will, or these other issues that I'm trying to raise. And so I think that the reason the turnout is so low is because nobody's talking about anything real. And part of my motivation is to do what you were talking about, is to use social media to get these ideas out. We've been putting out weekly videos that are really cleanly edited and just about 1 minute to 2 minutes short about each issue that we put out 4 of them so far, maybe 5 of them. And we're going to be going to all the campuses once school resumes in August or so. We're going to be heading up U of H and TSU and UHD and all the different universities. And I'm looking to work with students and different people who are involved on campus who know student groups. I mean, because I've noticed most people in college and, the younger generation, our younger generations, I'm 34, so let's say from my age to like high schoolers, are focused on, if anything, the presidential election. Beto O'Rourke or Bernie Sanders or who's this thing or what's Donald Trump up to. And I noticed that very rarely are people actually paying attention to what's going on here in Houston, which is where we can have the most effect.
Exactly.
A lot of people aren't paying attention to who's running for mayor or who's running for city council. That's where we can make a difference.
And I think it's just being ignorant, and it's not even on purpose. It's just that what we've been taught to pay attention to when you were in middle school or high school. They didn't tell you to look at the mayors. Yeah. We didn't learn the mayors. We learned the presidents of the United States. We look at the greater picture because nothing else we think matters. Nothing that we can do matters. So I feel like it's just bringing awareness could definitely dramatically change things for the best. I do really love the idea about going to these schools and bringing awareness to it, because I feel like those kids in that school are a generation and they know internet better than whatever we'll ever know, because they're always advancing. They're learning something new. So once they take that time to incorporate that knowledge, that will also be essential for them to, broadcast out to the rest. So I think that is an amazing idea. I would definitely recommend just going to like those popular schools that you can definitely know that it will definitely do an impact for them. Well, just everyone should know, but I feel like it will all ricochet out. So yeah.
That's the world.
Yeah, and I think the chance that Derrick has in this race is if we can get this to go viral, and if we could make a clever video that really talks about how it's time to hold these local politicians to the fire, like hold their feet to the fire and have them weigh in on these important topics. So if you're listening, please help us get these videos viral. This video will end up on Derrick's YouTube channel, right? Conscious Resistance.
Yeah, and we also have, the campaign is at DerrickBroze.com. We have Derrick Broze for Mayor on Facebook. We are on Instagram now. I think it's Derrick Broze for Mayor as well. And then we do have a Twitter at Broze for the number 4 Mayor. And we do have a YouTube channel. So all the videos I do on Facebook, like this one, we post on YouTube and we post elsewhere.
And how do people get on your, I get a text from you about every other day. How do people get on that list?
For those who are interested, if you're hearing this, honestly, I think the easiest way at this point is just to email me, and then I'll add you, because I just don't have the link off the top of my head. But my email, and I'm open to talk to anybody. My phone number is 713-909-0382. 909-0382. Call me whenever. Let's talk about your concerns. My email is just Derrick Broze for Mayor at protonmail.com. PROTON mail.com. Just hit me up. Let's talk. We definitely, for being such a young campaign, it's only been about a month or so. As I said, we've been accepted in the 4 debates. We do have a core group of about 5 to 7 volunteers that are really just kicking ass and helping us. We need more help and more support in different ways. And this is definitely, grassroots from the ground up campaign. The other guys are self-funded millionaires and career politicians, and that's fine. But we're running a different campaign. We're really trying to keep it that grassroots level. So I'm happy to work with anybody who's interested.
Are you not a millionaire, Derek? Not quite. And I want to challenge anyone out there, like share this video with some people that have the kind of abundance that could just say, hey, I'll pay that $1,200. It's nothing. I'll pay $1,200 to keep Derek in this race just because it's the right thing to do. Yeah, $5 is great, but like, share this in the right places. Let's get this movement going a little bit. So we're going to start to wrap it up here a little bit. We've made some good grounds, but one of my favorite topics to post on is vaccines, and we haven't dug in there yet. So I see we've touched on almost everything a little bit, but let's get into vaccines, because I know for me personally, I'll just say that I have no issue if y'all want to. I don't want to make vaccines illegal. That's the opposite of what I want. That's not freedom. What scares me is more and more cities are talking about this mandatory word when it comes to injecting poisons into my bloodstream. When you start talking about mandatory, now I'm scared. It's already been done in New York City or near New York. I mean, it's getting scary, y'all. And if you don't understand what's in the vaccines, don't trust anyone. Go look up the ingredients just like you would a cereal and look them up and see what they do. I mean, we were taught when we were young not to play with mercury, but they inject it into babies, like it's in the flu shot still. Like, it's just crazy. And just a real quick story before I pass it on to y'all to comment on this. When my daughter Emily was about 6, we went into the doctor because she was sick, and they said, oh, she's behind on this vaccine shot she needs. Now, just starting to research this. This was like 10 years ago. And I said, no, actually, we won't be doing that. I don't want any mercury in my daughter's bloodstream. And he said, oh, no, they don't put that anymore. That was years back. And I assumed this guy knew what he was talking. He's a doctor, Something's still in me even when you have the doctor outfit. I'm like, I trust this guy. I said, okay, cool. Yeah, let me see the ingredients just to make sure. And right there on the ingredients, thimerosal. I'm like, dude, this thimerosal, that's mercury. Like, you don't even know what you're putting. He didn't even know that he was injecting one of the deadliest poisons on the planet into infants' bloodstream. Well, not infant at this point, but you know what I mean. And he had no idea. Like, I had to school him on it. So that's the problem, that right there.
Okay, so this is probably whenever I showed this flyer to somebody last week when we were downtown passing out flyers at Discovery Green, there was a guy I was talking to. He looked at the flyer and he said, so you want to fight an uphill battle, don't you? Because of the things we're talking about are definitely not going to be popular topics. They're not going to make me friends probably with too many of the police department and 5G, the Verizon and all that. And this one is controversial, but I think it's absolutely one of the most important. Now, first thing I want to say is, again, I'm not a scientist. I am a journalist, an investigative journalist who interviews experts and who has written dozens of articles about vaccines and produced a number of reports about vaccines as well. And I do think there are reasons for people to be skeptical. I'm a scientist, by the way. I'm going to put that off for a moment today. I'm not going to mention the CDC whistleblower or the vaccine injury court. We'll save those for another day, because the focus of me making the vaccine issue part of the campaign is what Joe was referring to in the beginning, which is the mandatory vaccination order. So, as he said, this has already taken place in Brooklyn, in 2 different boroughs in Brooklyn, and there are states that are increasingly pushing to remove exemptions for vaccination orders. So there are some states that allow for personal, philosophical, or medical exemptions. As far as I'm concerned, they're all personal because it's you and your family. I mean, so whether it's because of religion or because of medical reasons or just because you don't trust it, that's your reason, right? Again, like with cannabis, your body, your choice. You own yourself. I believe in bodily autonomy. You should have the right to decide how you medicate yourself, whether that means with a vaccine or without a vaccine, holistically, you want to use plant medicine, oils, what have you. That's your choice. And I think it's a very dangerous precedent to set to say that we're going to allow the government to come forcibly inject somebody with a vaccination. Because I want people to think about this, because this is something that we've talked about on my radio program. I get to talk to different Houstonians, and when I've had people say, you should be thrown off the air for questioning vaccine. Some people have that response, and other people say, thank you for talking about this. I appreciate this. But what it comes down to, I think, is this, that if you support the idea that because of a measles outbreak or because of any other sort of outbreak, that there should be a mandatory vaccination order where the mayor comes in like he did in New York and says, you have 48 hours to vaccinate your children or you'll face a $1,000 fine. And then you'll face another $1,000 fine. Where do you think that leads? Where else does it lead but taking kids from parents? Because they're not going to just fine you for no reason. Just say, okay, we're going to keep fining you. What happens if you say, I'm not paying that? I don't think I did anything wrong. well, then eventually they're going to come to your house and try to collect that one way or the other, and you're going to end up with a police officer or maybe a medical physician or CPS or somebody coming to knock on your door. And what happens then if you say, I'm not coming with you? You see what I'm saying? It's only going to escalate, right? So why, when you think that you're supporting the health of everybody by calling for, supporting mandatory vaccinations, you need to understand that you're actually supporting a huge threat to everybody's individual liberty and to the health of the children. And that's just something that I am completely against. So if I am elected mayor, I would absolutely stand against any attempt by the city of Houston, city council, the state, federal government to institute a mandatory vaccination order or to remove exemptions. And the reason I think this is an issue is because there's a doctor by the name of Peter Hotez. He's recently been on Joe Rogan's podcast, and he's been going around speaking a lot. Me and Miriam heard him speak a couple months ago. He's a doctor from Baylor Medicine here in Houston. And he also is the father of an autistic daughter. And he says, no, it's not vaccines. And so he's going around giving these talks and saying, Texas is becoming a hub for anti-vaxxers, and Houston is one of the worst cities of it. We have all these people exempting vaccines. So he's out there saying that they should be passing laws to remove the exemptions and to make it where you can't, say no. California just passed a law, advanced it. It's going to pass pretty soon, it seems like, where it would limit doctors to only allowing for 5 exemptions a year. And any doctor who gave more than 5 exemptions a year would be investigated by the state. So, there's all these different attempts. That's why I bring this up. So when some people are like, where's that coming from? This guy, one of those crazy anti-vaxxers who, whatever sort of thing you want to say. The fact of the matter for me is it comes down to, again, you own your body. You own yourself. I have no right to tell you or any of you what you should do to your body and how you should medicate. And that is not a precedent that I have any interest in setting by allowing the government to come to somebody's house and tell you what you need to put in your body. I think that's a huge, dangerous issue.
So here's my thing. So I understand your perspective on vaccinations, but I feel like sometimes I'm trying to think about this to make this it's very, I don't know. Okay, so things happen. People get sick, things do spread. So I feel like the automatic vaccination, of course there's a backstory to your story and there's a reason behind theirs as well. So I think for a fact that they're doing those vaccinations based on an outbreak or something that's going on, not necessarily saying, I feel like as far as vaccination, we should do a better job at knowing exactly the harmful effects of things. That could be a beneficial factor, but to disregard complete vaccination is absurd in my personal opinion, because I just feel like it's important sometimes. Like I remember when I was in middle school, this girl had meningitis and everyone in the school could have been infected if they weren't getting that mandatory vaccination. So I feel like, of course, there are some benefits, but we should take a little more precaution and time into understanding and figuring out exactly what we're putting into our bodies and making sure they're natural products and not just giving it out just like on a marketing scale or just trying to make money to make quick buck, but to actually save our people, save them from these illnesses. But I feel like bottom line is that they're trying to kill us off and, the survival of the fittest, and that's just my conspiracy, but.
Well, I appreciate that perspective. I just want to say that you're right. Look, I just want to make it clear because there's always going to be somebody who said, oh, that guy's, doesn't believe in science or this or that, where, vaccines have saved lives throughout, humanity's history. But we're at a point now where babies and children at a very young age are being, I'm sure you're aware of this, being medicated and hit with such a just kind of cocktail of vaccines at a younger age than ever that they've ever been exposed to. And that to me just doesn't make any sense. And, there's also, again, today on the radio, we were reporting on the story here, downtown Houston, Harris County Jail. There's 400 inmates who are being quarantined right now because of a mumps outbreak, and the vast majority of them were vaccinated. There's an outbreak of measles on a Navy ship, and those are military employees who've been vaccinated. So, it's just, again, I don't want to get stuck too much in the science. I'm happy to have those discussions. But as far as the campaign goes, I just want people to know that, this is important as well to have this discussion, because that's another kind of ties into one of the other issues that I say that I support freedom of speech, because we're getting to a point now, and you kind of mentioned this, where topics like 5G or discussing the potential dangers of vaccines, those things are getting removed from social media and being censored. So we're at a point where it's not even safe to express yourself. And so absolutely, again, I would always stand in defense of freedom of speech and civil liberties and say that we have the right and we should encourage these kind of discussions, because if we just point fingers at each other and call each other names and say, well, you believe that, I can't talk to you, you're a conspiracy theorist or whatever, we're not getting anywhere as a society. We've seen that division taking place on the larger picture. We need to make sure that we have a city where we can have open dialogue. Otherwise, we're not going to be able to move forward at all.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, going back to the sinister thing, I don't know how sinister these vaccines are, but I do know that mercury is not an active component, yet it's in there. Like, why is it in there? It's not even an active component. Like, it's an emulsifier, it's a preservative. Like, there's other preservatives. It just doesn't make sense to me. And then the other thing that I think it's important to realize is that Merck is literally the number one contributor to NBC via their ads. And I think what I see happen is Merck got tired of people, DVRing their shows and, fast forwarding through the ads. So they started running their ads during the news. That's all I see happen. All this MMR outbreak and measles. For one, I wouldn't be surprised at all if they created this measles outbreak by just putting it out there somehow and having, people get infected. That is not out of the realm of possibility. It might not be, but the reality is what happened was nobody's died. There was no more people died from drowning by 1,000-fold than from measles. So why aren't the national news talking about teaching people to swim? Like, it just doesn't make sense. Nobody died from measles, but all of a sudden, all the news campaigns, all they're talking about is measles outbreak, measles outbreak, measles outbreak. And it was a big ad for Merck. Merck made millions and millions off of that campaign over the last 2 to 3 months. And if you don't see that, then you're not seeing the bigger picture. And the other thing I want to mention before I hand it back to you is they give babies that are within 24 hours of being born hepatitis B vaccination. And that's insane. You get hepatitis B from intravenous drug use or sex. Like, it's not, or are they scared these kids are going to start injecting needles into their second day of life on this planet? Like, the vaccine is supposed to wear off in 7 to 8 years. So you're telling me they thought these kids were going to be sexually active or intravenous drug users in their first 7 years on the planet? Like, that's just not logical. So while I don't disagree with all vaccine concepts, small doses of poisons make you immune to those poisons sometimes. Yeah, that could be a logical argument, and I think we should explore that. But it doesn't mean, I don't think we should ever mandate anything going into someone else's body, like Derrick said. And if you want to do an interesting study, look up measles deaths. Look up a graph of measles deaths and see when it dropped off. And it dropped off right before the vaccine was brought in. And it was because of cleaner drinking water. It had nothing to do with the vaccine. If you think the vaccine stopped measles death, look up the graph. Learn it. Research it. Look it up. I ain't telling you, trust me.
Yeah, I definitely just want people to encourage everybody who's hearing this, whether you're hearing it now live or later, on the website at derrickbroze.com, on the mayor page, it lists all these different issues, and we have released some of the videos. I know we're getting low on time, Joe, so I just want to mention briefly a couple of the others that I do think are important. One of the things that I'm really passionate about and I've worked with for, since the beginning of my activism is those of us in Houston who, are either just having a difficult time, maybe they end up without a job, they end up without a home, and they end up needing help and resources. I have worked with and partnered with Food Not Bombs Houston for a number of years. They feed downtown 4 times a week. Like I said, we're going to be going Wednesday night to volunteer with them to just show people a little bit about what they can do in their own community. And what we've seen under the last 2, the current mayor and the previous mayor, is that the homeless population continues to be criminalized and just treated like crap and pushed to the fringes of society. Now, at the end of the day, I think that we need to look at the deeper causes for these things. And you kind of talked about the money and just how much that drives our society. We need to look at the deeper cause of it, because the answer is not to say it's illegal to share food with the homeless. It's illegal to give them things that they're in need of. We've seen in the last year the Houston Police Department come and straight up just dump boxes of donations that were given to the homeless right into a dumpster right after they were given. We've seen live streams of that. Mayor Parker passed a ordinance in 2012 that said it's illegal to share food with more than 5 people at a time. Mayor Turner passed an ordinance that said that all homeless people have to keep their possessions in a 3x3 container. All of the laws you've been seeing passed over on the East End, where we're seeing a lot of this development, where they put the soccer stadium in Minute Maid Park. First, they started by 2012 passing this ordinance that said it was illegal to sleep, stand, or sit in the same place, for more than 2 minutes. Like these really silly, arbitrary laws. But their goal is to go after the homeless population. That's basically what their thing. And the mayor's out there saying, be compassionate. Don't give to the homeless. Support the city's homeless programs. And I don't think that's the answer. I think that, for one, the homeless should never be criminalized. There are some people who might be there by choice. Others are there because they got to bad circumstances, and we need to look at that and figure that out. Because the reality is Houston's homeless population has exploded. I mean, if you live anywhere around downtown, you've seen it just the last year or two, I mean, it's just happening. There's more and more camps happening around Houston. There's a lot of price increases going on in Houston. So there's reasons behind this that we need to have that conversation. But in the meantime, telling people that they can't share food with people is just insane. You know, I think whether if anybody out there who pretended to be a Christian or any sort of spiritual believer or believer in the Creator should just see the insanity of laws like that, or ordinances like that. And this ordinance passed in 2012, as I said. The mayor, after getting so much pushback from all kinds of religious groups and all kinds of activists, they said they wouldn't enforce it. So it's still on the books. Technically, they don't enforce it. Food Not Bomb still feeds every week downtown. But just the fact that that's on the books, that if a cop decided he wanted to just be silly one night and saw you feeding homeless people, he could give you a ticket for that. He could choose to arrest you. That's insane. So day one, immediately remove that from the city charter. Like that's a no-brainer to me. It's like they're already saying it's not being enforced, so why is it even written on the dang thing anymore? Remove that immediately, and then we start working towards figuring out the solution to the homeless problem. The other thing I'm really big supportive of is community gardens, urban farms, and food forests. I've been involved in working in community gardens for 8 or 9 years. The last Organic Outpost was a huge community place that a lot of us gathered at for food and for community and for music. And I saw how that community garden and that farm transformed that neighborhood in Fifth Ward of Houston, and I've seen it in other places. So again, as a mayor, I don't want to say I'm going to take your taxpayer dollars and do this new garden program. Instead, what I want to do is identify all of the vacant lots in the city of Houston that are owned by the city of Houston, that are just sitting there with trash piling up on them or just wasting away, and say to those neighborhoods, say you live over here in Fifth Ward and we find 3 or 4 empty vacant lots just sitting there. We're going to turn them over to the neighborhood. Do what you want. Turn them into community gardens. Turn them into urban forests. Let's build more farmers markets. We need to, what I believe is to decentralize and localize food production. What I mean by that is that we as a city, as the 4th largest city in the country, shouldn't be dependent on food coming from California, from Mexico, from elsewhere. Because what happens when a hurricane hits? All the grocery stores empty out in minutes, supplies start running low, and if you don't have any, food prepared for the hurricane or anything, you're in trouble. Your family might be in some big trouble. But what happens when we start transforming Houston and we've got food forests? I know Atlanta recently, just about a month ago, they passed a new law that said they want to build the biggest food forest in the country. I think it's going to be about 8 acres. And it's going to have bike trails with fruit trees planted everywhere, nut trees, free for anybody to take. There's not going to be any silly laws about, no, this is the thing, is the city's always thinking, is it going to look beautiful? Is it going to look pretty? We have all these trees planted along the freeway, and they're beautiful. I love the trees, but they're not producing anything. I mean, think about how this whole city, this giant city, could be transformed that way. And I mentioned hemp before. We plant hemp all along the bayou. We plant fruit trees all around. We start building community gardens, farmers markets. We actually start having local production here. Houston's not so dependent on other places. We're eating better. We're eating good food. To me, it's a no-brainer. We could just really make it happen.
I think that's just crazy that you bring it up, because it's like, why haven't we built these trees that produce fruits and veggies that we wouldn't have to pay arm and leg from California when it's right next door? Like, we look at these beautiful trees that we plant, but they have no value other than oxygen for us. But they can do both. It would be interesting. I feel like that still can be done without even just that leadership part. But I feel like now that you brought it to my attention, I would love to share that. Let people know that. Why don't we do such a a good deed for ourselves, at least for our pockets, because it doesn't take long to plant apple. It's just that easy. It's just that simple. It's just about, learning how to do it. And just knowing that you can do it. Just, changing it and just keeping people informed. I really think you're doing a great job.
Yeah, I appreciate that. So that one, and I'll mention the other two, I'll be a little more brief. We talked about freedom of speech, civil liberties. We talked about 5G. We talked about the no-knock ratings in cannabis. Surveillance, I kind of touched on this as well. The police are using, Houston Police Department, those of you who followed my work for years, you know that I exposed that the Houston Police Department was using cell phone surveillance tools called Stingrays, and these basically can gather up all the data on your phone. They're being used by police departments all around the country. But I tried to question the police chief. They were the police of HPD, chief of HPD about this. He didn't want to talk about it. He lied to me and said he didn't know anything about it. I found the contracts. The city of Houston has signed contracts with the Harris Corporation for these tools. They have facial recognition tools. They are using automatic license plate readers. There's what's called a real-time crime center, where HPD has all these cameras that you're seeing being installed around the city, downtown specifically. There's now, I think, 5,000, close to 5,000 cameras in and around the Houston area. We went from, in 2010, the city of Houston saying, we want to get rid of the red light cameras because, we don't want those charging people and because they might be spying on us. And then the city of Houston took federal government money and started installing
10,000 cameras all around the city. And some of these cameras can be outfitted with facial recognition. And they say this is to keep us safe from terrorism and this and that. I personally don't buy it, but I'm not going to make the decision. I want the people of Houston, again, as soon as I come in office, we take a full audit of all the tools that HPD has. We find out what are they working with, and let the people decide. Do we believe our police department should have facial recognition? Do we believe our police department should have these tools that can spy on our phones? And let the people of Houston decide. So I think that's important. And also, I will say on that, these are tools that typically get used against, poor communities, people of color, and, low-income communities. And they also do affect everyone. Let's imagine that, they're after somebody here in this room and they think you're wanted for a crime. They don't know where you're at, but they know you're on this block. So they just drive up and down the block with this tool running, the Stingray, and it's gathering data from every single phone that it passes. And they just looking for that one needle in a haystack. But in the meantime, they gather all this data, and we have no idea what they're doing with it, how long they're holding it, what it's being used for, and the whole thing's a big secret.
So now that you mentioned it like that, I think that you could also use this as a beneficial thing rather than like a bad thing at the same time, because it depends on what they're using it for. So like if they use this to identify a criminal and rather than randomly picking someone saying he looks like him and shoot him and kill him, they could use that device into like figuring out exactly what they need from a person. Now I do understand that you can use it in a negative way and just kind of snoop and be invasive of people's privacy. But I do think that in a way that if you do become mayor, you can incorporate it in a positive light, or maybe it could somehow transform the way of how we find a criminal, or how we say, oh, this is, what I'm saying, like it could have its, yeah.
So that's what HPD and other departments say, is that, look, we're using this just to catch criminals and things of that sort. But like I said, so this tool has been around, been used for about 10 years, but it's only started to get more interest for the last couple of years. And in fact, unfortunately, this is another example of the militarization of the police as well, because this tool started in Iraq and Afghanistan. This is where they were originally using it to try to catch people. And then they came back here and they sold it to the local police departments through the federal program called 1033. And so there have been lawsuits about Stingrays. There's gone to court. The big problem, I will say, with it is the secrecy. So what happens is you have a corporation called the Harris Corporation that produces this tool called Stingray. They sell it to the Houston Police Department. When they give them this contract, they make them sign what's called a non-disclosure agreement that says you can't tell anybody how it works or what you do exactly. So let's say they use this tool on you, right? You get arrested for drugs or something, right? So you're in court, and all of a sudden your lawyer finds out, oh, they used a Stingray on her to locate her. Well, let's challenge that and see what they found, because more and more courts are finding that it's kind of unconstitutional. They could basically, indiscriminately monitor everybody, and the whole point of the Constitution and the Fourth Amendment is to protect us from these invasive search and seizure. Now it's just digital, though. Before it was like, protect us from them coming in my house and taking my stuff. Well, now they can just use this tool and get in your house without having to physically do it. So it's a violation of the Fourth Amendment. But what's happened, so the cops get put on the stand and they say, tell us how you located her. And rather than tell how this tool works, they literally have let actual criminals, violent criminals, go and say, we're just going to drop the charges because they don't want to tell the judge how it works. There have been police departments, like in Baltimore, that have literally been held in contempt of court because they refuse to tell the judge how it works, because the police departments have signed a contract with a company that says they can't tell the people who pay the taxes to fund the thing how it works. And that's just insane to me. You know what I mean? Like, so it's another big example, and surveillance tools are something that's really important. I mean, we did put out videos on that. But the last thing I want to mention, this to me is, again, another one of the first things that got me going on this, is I think that it's clear that the mayor has too much power. The mayor of Houston has way too much power. Now, the way it works on the city level is the typical situation is you have what's known as a weak mayor or a strong mayor. And Houston has a strong mayor position. Some other cities have weak mayor position, and there's some details in there how they're different, but basically it just means the mayor has more power, this one he has less power. But in Houston, not only do we have a strong mayoral position, but this mayor, not just Turner, but the position itself, is extremely strong. So strong that over the years that every time I've tried to go to city council and say, hey, we're concerned about fluoride in the water, we're concerned about police violence, we're concerned about 5G or whatever, we get some council members that support us and say, hey, we're with you, we care about this too, but we can't vote on it because the city charter says that if the mayor doesn't support an issue, it can't be put on the official agenda, which means that it can't be debated, and which means it can't be voted on. So that means, for example, I'm going to city council tomorrow. I'm going to call the city secretary and say, I want to speak at city council. And they'll say, okay, what's your topic? I'm going to say 5G. They're going to look at the city agenda and they, okay, 5G is not on the official agenda, so that means put them all the way at the end. So that means I'll probably sit there for 2 to 3 hours tomorrow, waiting as they go through first the people who are on the official agenda, and then they get to me at the very end. And oftentimes, the mayor's already gone, half the city council's already gone, most of them are looking at their phones, they're not even paying attention to you. And the reason is because they know their power is so limited that even if they agree with you, they can't do anything unless the mayor says so. So a couple of years ago, the city council was like, we're going to introduce a resolution to change that. But guess what? In order to change the charter to take away the mayor's position, the mayor has to approve that in the first place. So you would have to have a mayor like myself that says, I don't want this power. So I want to change. I want to work on these 9 issues, make these changes, and then I want to amend the city charter to basically make the mayor like a custodian, just to make him basically have equal powers to the city council. And what that would mean is that when you go speak to your city council members, and you call them or email them, now they actually have some power. They have a say. I want to make it where if 1/3 of city council, there's 16 council members, if 1/3 of them come to the table and say, we're concerned about police violence, we want to debate this issue, or whatever it may be, then it's automatically put on the agenda. And that means when you call in there, when you go up there, you will be the first ones to speak. You will be heard. Then the resolutions could actually be introduced. There could actually be a vote. As it stands now, if the mayor says, no, we're not doing that, you're never going to get anywhere. And that's a big problem. So that's my other big issue, is that I want to amend the city charter to reduce the mayor's power. I don't want that power. I'm not, like my brother Coop said earlier, I've never really been into the political act, the electoral system. The reality is politics is everyday life. It's our relationships. But as far as the government, I've always felt like, and I still feel like, we can do so much in our own communities, right? But there are also some issues that are out of the grasp of our communities because they have this system set up in a way that we can't even, tell them what we want in our backyard. So if I can run and we can get these issues discussed, and we can get this, if I can raise enough money to stay in this race and get in the debates and bring these issues up, and if by, the creator's hands we get into office, we're going to transform this city. And we're going to show people what Houston could look like, a different Houston. And that's what I want people to do, is to start imagining a different Houston, a Houston where people aren't locked up for smoking a plant, a Houston where people don't have to worry about the cops beating out their doors without announcing themselves, and where we have community gardens and urban farms and food forests, where 5G is tested and studied and the people have a chance to say, where surveillance is no longer an issue, and where you don't have to worry about mandatory vaccination orders and all these different things, and the many other issues that people care about. Planting hemp all over the city, cleaning up the bayou, pulling out all the trash, pulling out all of the vehicles in there. That's another thing I want to do. Instead of spending more money investing in other ways, why don't we just clean up the bayou? That's the artery, the heart of our city. Clean up the bayou, plant hemp all around it, plant all these food forests, and we can reduce flooding. We can really transform the city and change it. So that's what we're trying to do.
Amen to that, brother. Preach on. So we have officially covered all the topics. Thank you both for being on the show, by the way. I want to thank some other people. Anna CQ is our music director of the show. Jordan Pinnell, Brandon Connor, Zachary Robinson, Chris Shannon, it's all squad. Guy Browns helps us out. Martian Cooper's been on the show many times. Paris Michelle Blair is in the house. She did our only show, Closeless. Myself and her and Brandon left our clothes at the door for that show. It was amazing. And then I have a new announcement for the Ridiclous Hour. We're joining forces with MothershipHouston.com, which is Katsila Dietrich and Renee Cassette Peterson. It's going to be a platform that a lot of different radio shows in Houston are going to come together and help support each other and spread the words for each other and things like that. I just wanted to mention, Ashley used the word bold. We need someone bold, I think, or something like that. But I've never met anyone as bold as Derrick, so that's why I think he's in the right position to be pulling this off. I want to start a viral video day where we get together and spend a whole day just doing some interviews and actually editing videos to try to get these 9 topics out to other cities to say, hey, this isn't just about Houston. This is about how do we encourage local politicians to weigh in on important topics that shame on us, we've allowed them to not weigh in on. So that's all I got. I'll close out the show with this. The only thing holding us back from living our ideal life is our own beliefs, and I invite everyone to love as ridiculously as possible and make all your wildest dreams come true. Much love and namaste, y'all. Thanks for being here, everyone in the building and online. We're out. Wow.